Sorry. The session will be recorded, and I would like to invite you to use the chat to ask questions to the speaker as we progress. You don't have to wait until the presentation is over to ask your questions. I will read them at the Q&A session. All right. So I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to our second edition of the International Open Access Week, which we called here at ALTA, Who Owns Our Knowledge? Today, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Samantha Smith from King's College London, where she's a professor and the academic director of King's Academy, which is the educational development team. Dr. Smith is well experienced in program development, also in online and distance education. And today she is going to talk to us about the elephant in the room, AI, and the challenges that AI poses to higher education. In different institutions, the approach to AI is different, and Dr. Smith is going to address why different institutions might take different approaches, but also she will discuss what does it mean for our graduates to leave universities with skills to thrive in the world, but also to remain owners of the knowledge that they acquire throughout their higher education. Dr. Smith, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my voice. I'll just share my slides. Okay, to the beginning. That's okay, you can see that? Yes, good.
Yes.
Oh, I've got the captions on again. Let's see if I can turn those off. Sorry. That's better.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me to talk to you today. Rather than going through lots of examples of what we're doing at King's College London or what other universities in the UK are doing, I thought I'd talk to you from quite a high perspective, I suppose. So really taking quite a philosophical view of what are the challenges, what are the opportunities that are being presented to higher education in general. And I'm going to draw quite extensively on a paper that's been published quite recently, which is called Background Briefing and 5 Scenarios for Higher Education in the Age of Transformative AI by Beard and Connolly. And I'll include a link to that at the end of the presentation, so you'll be able to access that if you're interested, because I will talk about it quite a lot as I go. I wanted to start by saying I think there's a real urgency for universities. This image on the left, which is something I found on the internet, but it really picks out so many of the questions that we're starting to grapple with. Bearing in mind that generative AI has only really been with us for what, 2 years, 2.5 years. These are very deep questions, and as a sector, we're not used to dealing with things with a great sense of urgency. Universities operate on very long time scales. You look at some of the old institutions, particularly in Europe, many of them are well over 1,000 years old. And actually, they're teaching in much the same way they were 1,000 years ago. So we're not used to being put under the kind of pressure where we need to respond quickly. But at the same time, costs are really rising for university. There's a lot of political criticism of universities around the world. Are universities really serving society well? And increasingly, I think, in the face of AI, skepticism about whether degrees, academic degrees, are as useful as we've always believed them to be. And we obviously do believe that as universities. There's been some survey data that shows that a lot of senior academic leaders, vice chancellors, and presidents of universities don't believe that their universities are really adequately preparing students for the future, or that we're training our faculty to use AI effectively for teaching. Even though they kind of accept that this is a massive challenge for us and a massive urgency, they haven't yet worked out what needs to be done. And then I think there's a real risk that we don't work together. That at the moment responses can be quite fragmented. Different universities are taking different responses, different attitudes to AI, and that's leading to a situation in which other industries, particularly big tech, could go much faster than higher education, and we could feel we're being left behind. Just going to pause at that point and check, am I going too fast? Do you need me to slow down?
No, it's okay.
Good, thank you. So the paper that I highlighted at the beginning that I'm going to draw on, it uses a scenario planning approach. And I know that at ALSA you've done some scenario planning in the last few months, but I think it's important to say that with a good scenario planning approach, it's not a kind of worst case to best case scenario. These are 5 possible ways that they've modelled how AI might respond to higher education. And the first of them is a kind of business as usual, where we slowly and steadily progress with the way we use AI, but in the end we might end up being overtaken by big tech. I know some companies like Google or Meta are already talking about whether or not they want to provide their own degrees. Second one is academia under siege, where universities maybe go very quickly into the AI space and they're very uncritical about how they use it, and then faculty and students resist and start working against the university rather than with it. The next would be a scenario where academia really gets involved in AI development and ensures that human intelligence remains central, which I think is quite an attractive proposition. But of course, the problem with that is we don't tend to have the kind of resources that big tech companies have to be able to develop the large language models and so on. The opposite of that, I guess, is academia in retreat, where universities attempt to prevent it and block it. And I think that's a place where many universities are at the moment, that they're so unsure how to respond that they're kind of putting up barriers. And I think that's probably not a sustainable way to go. And then finally, and I think this is probably where we do want to head, is that academia redefines itself and universities think about how do they adapt a flexible approach, flexible pedagogies in response to the changes in AI. Now, I don't think any one of these scenarios on its own is particularly likely. I think probably elements of each are likely to creep in, and I will pick up elements of each of them as I talk. So what are some of the opportunities? So I think that the biggest opportunity is that AI provides the potential for practically irreversible change that impacts almost every aspect of life and society. And this has really been driven in the last few years by the fact that these large language models can already produce outputs that are as good as most college students, most university students, and most competent programmers. So we need to think not about how do we develop people to be producing the kind of college outputs or programming outputs that they were 5 to 10 years ago, but how do they start from that AI output and move forward? So I think AI offers us a need and an opportunity to redefine education away from knowledge acquisition towards cultivating human-centered faculties, curiosity, creativity. And that's going to demand that we make a shift away from the kind of performance-oriented mindset where students are focused on grades and marks towards a mastery-oriented one, which encourages students' intrinsic desire to learn. So moving from what they know to what they can do. I think the kind of the ideal future where I'd like to see us aim towards is this what the paper that I'm drawing on heavily calls the high-tech, high-touch future. And this is a future in which students use the technology, they use the output from the AIs, and then focus on the skills that AI can't replicate in order to add considerable value. And I think in this kind of scenario, things like liberal arts education, personalized supervision, personalized tutorial systems, those are likely to become much more relevant because they focus on those critical skills, they focus on the broader context. So I think interdisciplinarity is a word that we use a lot at the moment. We've used it for many years in higher education, recognizing that complex problems in society require knowledge and skills from a wide range of disciplines. But until recently, it's been a very hard thing to teach in universities because you've got this balance of breadth and depth. And in order to have somebody know enough of several disciplines to be able to meaningfully contribute to a difficult problem, you don't have enough time in the course of an average university degree. But with AI, I think interdisciplinarity has become much more attainable. And therefore, I think we're seeing a real rise. There's a trend of new universities popping up which really focus on a kind of interdisciplinary problem-solving approach to higher education, working with the technology, but also really working in teams and groups to bring a whole range of different human skills to interpreting the massive amounts of data that can be available.
Sam, can I please ask you to slow down a little bit? Thank you.
Of course, sorry.
Thank you.
So again, I think we need to embrace the opportunity to redefine education away from knowledge acquisition towards the cultivation of human-centered faculties like curiosity and creativity. These high-tech, high-touch approaches that are highlighted here will emphasize the uniquely human skills. The goal of educating with AI is using it as a tool that assists in human development, such as providing real-time feedback to students, which can accelerate learning. So we need to think about how do we design education to encourage students' intrinsic desire to learn by giving them more freedom to explore their own ideas, to be able to personalize their journey through higher education. So those are the opportunities. I think now we come to the challenges, and obviously this could be long, but I've picked out a few. And I think the biggest of them is faculty resistance. And I think it's very important to say that when I talk about faculty resistance, it's not because I think we're old or out of touch or unwilling to accept change, but we have really very legitimate concerns about how AI is going to impact upon what we do as universities. So I think there's enormous mistrust in universities about the companies themselves and what their motivations are in the educational sector. Why do AI companies want to be in the educational sector? What does that mean for our intellectual property? How are we able to protect that? I think there are really valid concerns that we're only beginning to understand now about how does an AI impair students' critical thinking abilities and their cognitive development? Are they offloading some of their thinking to the AI and therefore not developing those thinking skills themselves, and how can we protect them against doing that? I think there are fears that AI fosters a kind of fast track and uncritical approach to research and writing among students, but among colleagues as well, potentially, that it's quite easy to produce something quickly with AI and not go through that process of reading and analyzing and digesting information. And there are certainly some professors who view AI and certainly reliance on AI as fundamentally undermining our quality and our rigor. So I think these are real issues for us. Some faculty view this as educational malpractice, and in some cases they're right. I think we are grappling with those issues around when is it okay and when is it not okay. So I wanted to show you here, this is from a survey done. This was a joint piece of work between colleagues at the London School of Economics and Peking University in Beijing. And they asked the same questions of their staff. Unfortunately, the colours are the opposite way round in the way they presented their data. So red in one is blue in the other. So you have to just remember that.
Some I'm really sorry. It seems that the translator is not keeping up, so I'm sorry.
That's
I'll ask you
okay.
to sleep slowly again. Sorry.
That's no problem at all. So this piece of work was done across two universities in London and in Beijing, with the same questions. And in each university, staff were asked, academic staff were asked, do you ever use generative AI in your educational practice? Bearing in mind this was done in early 2025. And about half in each university said that they'd never used generative AI for educational purposes. And I think the reluctance stems from questioning the value of it in teaching. For 46% of respondents said they didn't see that it would have value. And then a number of in the comments in this survey, a number of educators described the fact that allowing students to use AI was giving them a substitute for thinking, writing, or coding. 11.5% of all respondents said they thought generative AI was a tool that impairs students' cognitive skills, particularly critical thinking. And their concerns include the threat to intellectual rigor under the fact that intellectual rigor is threatened by working in this very fast and uncritical way with AI. So that's the staff picture. However, students are using it. And this chart, sorry, it's not perfectly in focus. This chart shows the comparison of the data from 2024 and 2025 to the same questions. And what you see is that in that 1 year between 2024 and 2025, the proportion of students using generative AI for their assessments went up from 53% to 88%. So I think we can probably predict that by 2026, it's going to be almost all students will be using it in some way. That's not to say that all the ways they're using it are bad, and that it's always a problem. But I think we need to respond to the fact that students are using it. Whether we say they can't or they can, they are using it. So one of the ways in which we respond to this, I think, or we can respond to this, is through rethinking assessment. But this is really difficult. We've assessed in universities, as I said at the beginning, for thousands of years in quite similar ways, usually through, certainly in the UK, we assess a great deal through writing. So in this diagram here, on the left, what I've called assessment is what we sometimes call assessment for learning. And on the right, where I've called it evaluation, we sometimes call that assessment of learning. And in one case, it's about checking, do students know what we need them to know? Can they do what we need them to be able to do in order to get this credit, these grades? And on the other side, it's more about the process and how do we continue to encourage them to be curious, to be asking questions? Do we give them feedback that guides them to the next step? So I think we need to move more from the green area towards the blue area. And in order to do that, we need to focus on methods that use what AI can't do, or that don't enable students to work with AI. So we're seeing a big shift in the UK towards oral assessment. I know that in many parts of the world, I suspect in Central Asia, you still use a lot of oral assessment, but I don't know that for a fact. We've largely moved away from it in the UK, but now I think we're going back to that, because oral assessment is authentic. It's the student, you are face to face with the student, you're having a conversation. It's by and large secure, but it's flexible as well. You can probe into a student's understanding. Other effective methods that we talk about are flipped assessments, where maybe you get students to generate an output with AI, but then the assessment is actually on the critical evaluation of that output. To what extent is it accurate? To what extent is it valid? To what extent is it using credible, citable sources? At the end of the day, I think with assessment, we need to know students when they leave university and they go into the workplace, they need to be able to show what they can do. And some of that's going to be being able to show what they can do with AI. Because I think one of the things we're going to see changing fastest is that some of those graduate jobs, the first jobs that students get after they finish university, those will be the jobs that may become automated. So the legal, in law firms, the clerking jobs, the jobs you get straight after university, a lot of that will be done by AI. So it's not those skills that students are going to need, but they are going to need the skills of being able to look at the AI output and verify that it's valid. Another trend we're seeing extensively now in Europe is this shift to what we're calling programmatic or program-focused assessment. We have moved over the last 20 or 30 years to a very modular system where students take modules of learning, and those modules are quite self-contained, and the assessment is attached to the module. And what happens is that students treat each module and each assessment as an isolated element, but they don't have a sense of how it builds up into the whole program. So how are they showing that they're developing the wide range of skills that we want them to develop through their education? We're also getting a lot of complaints from students that they either get repeated, they get tested on the same skills over and over again. They don't get tested on other skills that they see are important. So we're moving very much to this program view of assessment. And there are various ways that I've outlined here in how that might be done. So capstone projects where, I mean, many universities would have some form of capstone project as a dissertation at the end of the degree, where many things that are learned throughout the time at university are assessed in a final project. We're looking at integrative assessments which bring together different elements of learning from different modules and apply them to a problem that couldn't be solved just with the knowledge from one or other module. I think the reasons for doing this really are partly about reducing the burden on students, making fewer assessments, but making them more meaningful. And as I say, really trying to make sure that by the end of a program, students are able to really confidently and competently meet the program level outcomes that are defined for that degree. The next bit I want to talk about is how do we develop ethical and critical graduates? And I think in some ways this is the most important part of what I want to talk about. These terms here again come from this same paper, the briefing document and the scenarios. And they talk very much about how, whilst AI is going to significantly change the economy and significantly change the workplace, there will be lots of jobs still for humans. We just need to make sure that the humans are ready for those evolving jobs. And they put these roles into three kinds of categories for graduates. And the first category are, and they're all car related terms. So the first category is the accelerators, the people who will make us go faster. And those are the roles that will really use AI and drive things forward. And they will require skills like being able to work with the large language models, work with the deeply contextualized knowledge. And they've got examples there of roles like data scientists or AI trainers. The next category are what they call the brakes, and these are the people who will make us go a little bit slower and more carefully. And those are going to be the roles where there is regulation required. So doctors, lawyers, other licensed professions, where it's going to be really important to make sure that there are humans who can work with the output of AI and ensure that it is valid, that it is robust, that it's not going to take us into very ethically difficult situations. And then the third category that they outline are the steerers, the steering wheels. And these are the people who are going to help us manage the AI transition itself, how to include safety, governance, ethics, supervision, auditing. And I think in some ways, I see universities, we have a role in developing these skills in all of our graduates, but I think we also have a role ourselves in steering, particularly around supervision, ethics, governance. Those seem to me to be very important roles for a university. Another role, probably the most important role that I think we have as universities, is going to be the cultivation of AI fluency. And I know that there are a number of people in the audience today who are from a library background, and I think this AI fluency, AI literacy is going to be very, I mean, for all university staff, I think it's going to be very important. But I see this as a key role that libraries are going to need to play in the future, which is how we support staff to support students in the effective, efficient, ethical, and safe interaction of humans with AI. And there's an Anthropic framework, a framework developed by the company Anthropic, who've also developed a free course. Again, I'll provide the link at the end on AI fluency. And they highlight these 4 Ds: delegation, where we need to know when is it appropriate to delegate a task to AI and when is it not appropriate. We need to develop the skills of description so that we are able to work with AI meaningfully through the prompt engineering, giving the best prompts, the most accurate prompts to be able to get the outputs that we need. The skills of discernment to be able to critically evaluate the outputs, which is going to be absolutely crucial. Probably the most crucial skill I think that graduates are going to need. And then diligence, making sure that when we work with AI, that we're doing that in a way that is transparent, that it's ethically responsible, that we are able to kind of account for what we've got, where we've got it from. So I see this as being a really vital area for universities, and we're still very early in how we approach that, I think. And then I think this is a kind of where I would like to see us going, that I think academia can position itself proactively as the most credible authority in aligning AI with human values. So there is a role for us in creating academic AI tools, developing ethical LLMs, large language models like Chat PhD, which is for PhD students, but encourages them to work in a way that is really transparent, open. We need to defend our academic intellectual property. We need to protect our own knowledge, our own work from being exploited without attribution. And I think we've got a real role to play in working with the big tech companies and ensuring that all of the knowledge that is generated through academia isn't just exploited. We have a role in setting standards for AI ethics and for how we govern its use. And we have a role in value alignment, ensuring that AI serves a range of human values, that it doesn't just serve the needs of a small group in society. I think where we are uniquely placed is that we're not pressured by commerce in the way that big companies are. Big companies have this pressure to get as much of the data, as much of the information under their own roofs. We don't have that. And therefore we have the potential to become the most trusted authorities. But we will need to work with other organizations and companies and governments and so on to achieve that trust. At the moment, I think there is not massive trust, certainly in the UK and in the United States, between governments and universities. So that seems to me a very important thing to be working on. And then the final few things I want to say, what should we be doing? We should be working towards constructive integration. We must work with AI. We can't pretend it's not there. We can't just keep banning people from using it, because it is a common challenge. And I think we need to work as staff and students together. Students, as I've shown, are already using it, so they will be able to help us think about how to support them to use it most meaningfully. We need to work on developing metacognition for AI, making sure that we support students to be critical in evaluating the quality, the context, and the limitations of what they're getting. We need to try and avoid the resistance that risks us being marginalized and alienated. I think if people perceive that we are resisting it, then we'll set up this divide, or we'll continue this divide between the bits of society that move forward with it and the bits that don't. I think there's a need to, we must balance our need to respond to rapid change while preparing for the future. So we need to work out how much do we respond to every change, and how long can we wait to see which changes are going to be meaningful. And then I think we can provide really, sorry, I've gone too lost my place there. We can provide vital forums for democratic deliberation, ethical reflection, and collective meaning making. And I think universities have always done that, and we must continue to do that. We are still, despite all the tensions, I think very trusted in societies as being places that can bring together dissenting voices and have honest and constructive dialogues about the next steps and the way forward. So, in conclusion, I think that there's a civic role for the university. There always has been, and there always should be. And if we adapt, we can reaffirm our role as essential civic institutions. As citizens grapple with profound questions, universities can provide vital forums for democratic deliberation, ethical reflection, and collective meaning making. And in this scenario, universities can thrive by training our students to be the human steering wheels who exercise that judgment, oversight, and ethical accountability, ensuring that technology serves diverse human values. And here are a few of the links that I've referred to through the talk. So I will stop sharing my screen now. I hope I haven't talked too long. And happy to take some questions. I hope that wasn't too garbled.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Professor Smith, and for reminding us of the pivotal role institutions of education, such as universities, but also library have to play. I really like the last part where you say collective meaning making. We already have 3 questions in the chat. I would like to invite the other colleagues to also think about what they would like to ask you. I also have some questions of my own, but I will read some from the chat first. The first one is, what is the policy of King's College towards the use of AI?
So we don't have one policy. We have guidance which you can find on our website. It's publicly available. What we do is we provide quite clear guidance for staff in making choices. We recognized early on, we felt early on that there are going to be some circumstances where AI use is not appropriate and other places where it will be. So we have given advice at the institutional level, at the department level, program level, and individual level for how to make those assessments. What we do have is a cover sheet. So we basically ask for each assessment that it's clear to students what they can use AI for and what not. And they have to tick and sign a sheet that says these are the things that they have done or haven't done. So they have to provide that acknowledgement of how they have or have not used AI.
Before I continue with the questions, I just want to make a ask a clarifying questions. Is there any form of mandatory or highly recommended training on what is AI? Because there are different forms of AI, but I assume that oftentimes we mean large language models such as ChatGPT and the like. Are there any mandatory trainings for your teachers, staff, and students before we even get to the point of recommendations and policy?
Mandatory is very difficult in the UK. We have provided a training course, and it's publicly available. It's on the platform FutureLearn, and it's I will find it and post it in the chat in a moment.
Mhm.
So that is a guide to working with AI in higher education, or in education generally, actually, that was produced by my colleagues at King's College. Um, but it's not mandatory, it's recommended, and we advertise it. We are moving towards now again, not mandatory. We find it very difficult to make anything mandatory. Um, but going round faculty by faculty, department by department, and doing workshops and inviting
Mhm.
staff there to at least have that conversation. But we can't make people do it.
Um, uh, I will slightly paraphrase one of the questions in the chat about the resistance, but also link it to the fact that we cannot um, oblige anyone to actually understand how an AI functions, even with simple technical terms. And we as practitioners, teachers and librarians, we see that even if a professor might not understand the mechanics behind an AI, they see how it can be misleading, despite the fact that it, when we use AI, it says, I'm going to respond as a renowned expert. So there is this built-in humanizing aspect, and students take it for real. But professors, practitioners know that it's oftentimes producing faulty or superficial results, speaking with confidence, right?
Yeah.
Is there any, so this might be some sort of, reading through the chat, that this is the resistance that maybe teachers not necessarily explain very well to students, but it is well-founded resistance. And maybe through building more understanding of what generative AI is, we can have a better approach and maybe really bring to the students this understanding that by using a generative AI, they actually are highly in risk. Because you talked about creativity and critical thinking, but practically all of the research shows that the divide is actually getting bigger, and that by cognitively offloading, you actually are not gaining anything.
I think that's a really great question, and it gets to the heart of it. I think we we are used to teaching our subjects. So if you're a teacher of history, you're used to teaching the facts and the analysis of history. You're not used to teaching critical thinking skills in a very direct way. You think that students acquire that through the discussion of the discipline. I think we have to turn that around. We have to assume that they can digest a lot of that fact, a lot of the facts, and a lot of the information very easily. And we need to spend a very much greater part of our time as academics teaching them how to look at what that output is and understand whether it, where is it drawing from,
Mhm.
having that dialogue, if you like, that humanizing interaction. Why did you say that? Where did you get that evidence from? On what basis do you tell me it was that way? And we're not used to doing that, so we have to retrain ourselves
Mhm.
in the way we teach and we think about education. In some ways, I don't think this is so very different from the way in which the internet has changed our lives. But the internet has taken, how old am I? 30 years, to make such a big impact. That if we think, those of us who are old enough think back to before the internet, if you'd been able to think about typing a question into Google or whatever search engine you like and getting an answer out, we'd have said that was going to destroy our ability to read and to critically think. It hasn't, because we've adapted to it. But I think the real difference here is it's so quick that we can't adapt. So we need to make a really big change, I think, in how we work with students, that the information they get, they will get it. We can't stop them using it. We have to think about, how do we teach them to be asking different questions so that they are interrogating the output much more meaningfully, to understand whether it's valid, whether it's very biased, whether it's very superficial, whether it's hallucinated. Because all of that is just going to get better and better at, you know, the hallucinations, the sort of made up content we saw 2 years ago. We already see less of it. So I'm not being very clear here, but I think your question gets to the heart of it, which is we need to really change the amount of time we're spending, that we don't assume that students are going to acquire those skills through the subject knowledge, but to kind of assume that the subject knowledge is a vehicle for acquiring the skills, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Right, that wasn't a very good answer.
I know, I think you actually touched upon several things that people have been asking in the chat. Uh, since it's open access week and we're talking a lot about giving open access to research, to data, to educational materials, how do you think that this adds to the issue of defending academic intellectual property being misused in the age of AI? So I think just a little bit of context maybe for our audience, that we know that large language models are trained on pretty much anything they could scrap from the internet without giving any without
Attribute.
yes, without acknowledging intellectual property and so on. So we are using tools that are trained illegally to get taking data that without making reference to it. So with this push for open access and making data sets available and the research available, how is this going to affect the misuse that AI can do?
Gosh, that's a very difficult question. I think it's a risk. I mean, I do think it's a risk that everything that is publicly available is also available to AI. But I also think we can't resist that. We need to be, in a sense, as open as we can be about sharing what we think and sharing what we learn and sharing what we value, and making sure that that is also contributing to, I hope that there will be legislation and regulation over time. I think AI at the moment is outstripping that, but I do believe that it will come. I think it has to come. There has to be some regulation about intellectual property. In the meanwhile, I think we shouldn't be too defensive and lock up our own knowledge and understanding, or our own data or research from the rest of the world, because we've had a long journey to get to open access and open science, and I think it's very much founded in the kind of values of cooperation and working together and sharing our understanding. So I don't think we should resist it at this point, but I think we should really campaign and work together to support any move to kind of regulate the way in which intellectual property is scraped and to ensure that it's acknowledged when it's used. I think that's at a fairly early stage. I definitely see the beginnings of that in the European Union, which obviously doesn't any longer include the UK. But I think we're going to see some interesting legal challenges over the next few years because the EU is trying to begin some regulation about AI. And I think some of those big global companies are going to challenge the EU. And from that, we will probably begin to see how regulation might develop.
Could we maybe think that, following up on what you say, that it is specifically by opening access to high quality research on which AI will be trained could ultimately lead to improvement of the AI outputs so that they give back more academic vocabulary, more uh I don't know, but in a way, can we trick the system by specifically opening access?
I think we can. I mean, I think relatively speaking, we are a small percentage of the knowledge created. If you see how much content is created in the world, much of it being, not as rigorous and as tested as academic knowledge. But I think moves to look at some trusted large language models, to have large language models that are trained explicitly on very trusted data sets that will ultimately give more reliable outputs so that chat GPT perhaps becomes not the model you go to if you want to know, it might be the place you go if you want to create something quite superficial and immediate, but if you want something that's more rigorous, perhaps you will go to a different large language model that only draws its data from trusted and validated sources. So I do think that continuing to put our data into an open access space is the way to go.
Mm. Thank you. I'm going to read translate one of the questions from the chat. It's from our colleague Nazgul Bekturganova. She's asked, from your experience, to what extent are teachers ready to integrate AI in their practice? But while they sorry, Russian is not my native language, but still abiding to academic honesty. So to what extent are teachers ready to integrate AI in their practice, but still preserving academic honesty?
I think in general, our teachers are not ready for this at all. I think our students are probably more ready for it than our teachers in many ways. We have, I mean, I speak for myself. I'm going to be one of the older people, but I think to have become successful in academia, you've come through a certain tradition, a certain culture. You thrive in a certain environment, and we are not. We're quite mistrustful. We have learned to teach in quite traditional ways, often reflecting the ways we were taught. I know the King's Academy, the department I lead, we work with supporting all the teachers at King's College London in their teaching practice. And many of them are ready to use AI for their research work. But they aren't really thinking about how to use it in their education. They want to continue to teach in the same way. If their passion is for research, then they maybe aren't willing to spend the same amount of time rethinking their pedagogy, how to work with students, how to completely redesign the classroom environment. So I think for the teachings, we've got a huge amount of work to do with staff. I think in the
Mhm.
research space and the kind of the more academic the practice of doing research and writing, they're probably a bit more ready for it
Mhm.
because it's enabling them to process data more quickly, to collaborate more easily in some spaces. Um, but certainly, I think we're seeing some interesting trends. I think there's been some analysis done on research outputs that shows that research is narrowing in certain fields. People are not going in as many directions because I guess they're using AI to guide them, and that's guiding them down slightly narrower paths. So I think we've got a lot of work to do with staff in universities, and I know I've been having lots of conversations in my own institution about how do we begin that conversation because people are very busy. You know, everybody who works in a university, they have to do their research, they have to do their teaching, they have to do their administration. And now we want them as well to rethink everything and learn new skills. And we're not able to take any of those existing commitments away from them. So we're asking them to do an awful lot. And I think we're seeing quite a lot of pushback and quite a lot of people just sort of covering their ears and their eyes and saying, like, I can't deal with this today. So yeah, it's a very big challenge.
Thank you very much. I would like to share in the chat the link to the paper that you mentioned, and I had it open somewhere. But if you, yes, I have, if you don't mind, because you mentioned it a few times, and I would like people to have access to it.
Yes, I will
Um,
also
yeah,
try and share quickly the Future Learn course that we've developed.
okay. Um, so your comment from Katya in the chat was that since the universities is issuing a diploma guaranteeing a certain level of professional competence, uh, I think that we need, as institutions, we need to decide, do we and how do we include AI as part of this? But also, I'm wondering, do you see in some mid long observable future, we had the social networks and the values and algorithms. We already had this discussion, and then AI appears, and I think we're back to the same conversation about what are the values, whose values. And again, it seems like, I mean, people who create AI, they come out of universities. It seems that the economic interest might be stronger than the interest for knowledge. But I also wonder if this might not be a push for universities to make some different directions. For example, I don't know. So I see that another elephant in the room is grades and GPA and this very performative measured. I don't know. It's I don't know. Formative assessment. I don't know
Mhm.
if this is something that we probably should also address, because you talked about personalized mentorship and tutoring and personal building, your own personal learning pathway. But on the other hand, with grades, we also kind of shooting ourselves in the feet.
Yeah, I mean, I decided not to go to the grades conversation too strongly because I wasn't sure how that would how that would go. But my when I talked briefly about programmatic assessment, the purest form of programmatic assessment has no grades.
Mhm,
All it has is formative assessment with feedback
mhm.
and lots and lots of data points. So actually you can use the AI in a sense to tell you how your students are doing without ever giving the students a grade. So you have lots of data points, and for each data point and the feedback, you know whether a student is meeting an outcome. Are they demonstrating a skill that you value, and are they demonstrating it at a high level or a adequate level? And you can build up that picture over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years through their data. And at the end of, maybe once a year, you sit down with your colleagues and you say, we've got 30 students on this program. We can see that 25 of them are progressing really well. They're meeting the data point, the outcomes that we want. 5 of them are not meeting them all, and maybe we need to ask them to do some additional tasks. But you do it without grading, you do it without that kind of moment of testing. And students are then able to kind of concentrate on the things that they find most interesting or most challenging. But I think I've seen that done in a few places in the Netherlands really well. In the UK and the US, I think we're not ready for that because we have this GPA system, or in the UK, we have a classification system, and we're very committed to it. So convincing people to break from that is very, very difficult. But intellectually and educationally, I think you're absolutely right that breaking with those GPA and grades is going to be something we have to think about.
Thank you very much, Professor Smith. I think that we are out of time. If there is any further questions, maybe people can leave them in the chat and we can communicate further. I feel like with every conversation about AI, we have more questions than answers, which is a good thing. But it seems to me that we kind of got also to the point that open access could be one way to fight with misinformation and populate AI with higher quality information. Thank you one more time, and thank you for everyone who joined and asked questions. And I'm sure that there is a lot happening now in everybody's minds. Probably pass it on to Judas to close. Maybe there are some final remarks or announcements.
Спасибо. Thank you, Professor Smith. Thank you, Angelina. I would like to switch into Russian to make some announcements for our audience. Уважаемые коллеги, мы вас благодарим за участие.
Прошу прощения, Джорджис, пожалуйста, можно продолжить? Sam, thank you so much. That was brilliant as always. You did a wonderful presentation, one of the best I've ever heard. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Джорджис, пожалуйста, продолжайте. Это все, что мне хотелось сказать.
Спасибо, дорогие коллеги. Мы видим, что присоединились со всей Центральной Азии. Я видела коллег из Азербайджана, из Армении. Нам очень приятно, да, что мы все вместе работаем, чтобы обсудить такие, насущные проблемы, да, в сфере высшего образования. Я бы хотела напомнить, что программа онлайн-мероприятия АУЦА продолжится. У нас запланированы интересные сессии на следующей неделе, а также в последнюю неделю октября. Поэтому, пожалуйста, следите за рассылкой. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо всем большое.
Большое спасибо. Большое спасибо, Джорджис. Молодцы вы все.
Take care,
До свидания.
everyone.
Ангелина, большое спасибо и вам.